Your people are probably anxious about AI. Some people are fighting it, some just want quiet, and your default leadership playbook might not be fixing it. So, what are your most resistant employees trying to tell you? And what is AI doing to their morale? Dr. Jeff Kaplan has spent 4 decades coaching leaders inside major health systems, and his new book makes the case that your human advantage is the only one that AI can't replicate. Jeff, let's get into it.
All right. Good to see you, Raj. Nice to be
Good
here.
to see you too. Tell us a little bit about your book.
So here it is. It's all about, yeah, it's all about what we knew before, but now is only being accelerated, which is the things that you bring it and the human experience, things like empathy, understanding, engagement. Those things are more critical than ever. And it's the things that AI cannot replicate.
Now, what's actually happening psychologically inside the organizations that are feeling this pinch? That am I going to lose my job because of AI?
Well, they are losing their jobs, right? And so am I going to also lose my job?
Right.
My colleague just left.
Yeah.
Am I next? At the more senior levels, that less worried about it, but it's particularly problematic for early career folks because they're just they're just building their skill set, and a lot of their skill set is taken over by AI. So that's the concern. Companies at the higher levels are trying to figure out how to integrate it. They're worried about competitive advantage over their competitors, right? Or just being overshadowed by their competitors. And at the lower levels, they're worried about losing their job.
In some cases, people are saying that the job losses were really just cutting the fat and they're using AI as an excuse. That's not really the excuse, that they were going to cut people anyway and they're just cutting. Do you think that's going on, or do you think a lot of it has to do with AI actually taking over some jobs?
That's so funny. There wasn't fat until you brought the pig into the house. That-
Okay. Elaborate a little bit.
So AI is helping us create more efficiencies. That's true, but it's not just about creating. So it's helping some people do their existing job better and quicker, but it is absolutely taking over jobs for other people where it can kind of do most of their job. I just look at the Amazon layoffs, look at, some of the large company layoffs. It's obvious. And look, the folks that are saying what you just said, they'll be able to say that for about another 3 months. And but then it's kind of too late anyway. I
Yeah.
think what leaders need to do though is they need to be transparent. They need to be honest. They need to share, here's the vision, here's what we're doing, but also not try to lie, quite frankly.
About a year ago, Accenture laid off 11,000 people, and they said that they're going to lay off more for those who cannot upskill themselves to learning AI. And we're starting to see that across the board, that if you're resisting learning how to use AI, that you may have one of the jobs that gets cut. Another interesting point I've seen is that there are a lot of companies who have purchased very expensive AI tools, large contracts with Microsoft for Copilot, and they tell their staff to use them, but there's no training beyond, hey, here's how you use it. And people maybe get a very cursory view of some of the applications, but then they don't know how to integrate that into their day-to-day usage. And so executives are thinking, my God, we just spent millions on all of this technology. Nobody's using it. What's going on? How do we get more people to use it? And then sometimes they think maybe we should cut those people who aren't using it. And that's actually just the wrong move, because you just haven't trained people enough. So where should leaders figure out where their organization is at? How do they figure out the right answer and the right path for them?
That's beautiful. That's a great point. Yeah. So first of all, organizations should have an AI policy. What is our policy around use of AI? Where is it okay and where is it not okay? Then we need to be able to teach AI. Then we need to agree, where are we having a common language and a common approach? What are the guardrails, right? The do's and don'ts of using AI, but also just in how we want to communicate. So, for example, do we make it okay for people to have an AI agent respond to all their emails? And if not, where's that line? Or, okay, so if we're not allowing that, is it okay to ask an AI to help me respond to this one particular email, right? So it's not an agent doing it, but I'm doing it, but I'm saying, hey, engine, respond to this email, right? So there should be etiquette, like, you go to the gym and it's got rules, for behavior conduct. There should be that around using AI.
So those are just some of the more common things that people might know about for using AI. But AI is really good for analytics, for analyzing data, for looking at spreadsheets, pulling out insights from spreadsheets. How do you train people the best practices to use these, especially since leaders themselves may not always be the ones implementing AI even in their own day-to-day work?
Yeah, I think organizations should have like an intranet site. So they should somewhere that's, employee access, where employees are sharing best practices, learnings, lessons learned. Hey, here's what I did.
Mm.
Could also be a moderator that says, hey, this thing actually is one of the things that violates our terms of agreement, in terms of AI use in our organization. But hey, have you tried this? So there'll be common practices people can learn really quickly. That is actually one of the ways that, as an organization, you can get ahead of other organizations, where you're creating a space to share, best practices around using AI, and then doing lunch and learns, and having, at some point, you're going to find that the top 10% of AI users, right, love to share all their techniques, right? So create a little committee, right, and have discussions, and then do lunch and learns for the larger employee group, where, today we're going to talk about using an Excel and doing data analytics and that kind of stuff.
I love that because that reduces the anxiety around the whole topic of AI as well. I know that some people are a little resistant, thinking that I don't want it to then start thinking for me. I've got my brain. I don't want to start using AI to do the thinking because then I feel like I can get replaced. So there may be some sort of security blanket, false as it might be, that I don't want to use AI because I might lose my job. But I think your point about doing these lunch and learns and sharing experiences about ways people are using it, such as here's a prompt sequence that I use, not a prompt, because one prompt usually isn't enough anymore, but here's a way I figured out how to get AI to help me think through some of the problems that we're facing.
E
Yeah.
Sorry, exactly, and so, but also in those lunch and learns, talking about, and in the teachings, talking about the limits of AI, right? So, for example, hallucinations. I just read and shared with our coaches a great article that one of my former clients had sent around to his folks, which is, this is in surgery, right? And talking about like how a surgeon might say, I don't know. And the title of the article is, AI will never tell you I don't know. Right.
The line I like to use is AI will very confidently give you the wrong answer.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And if you ask it for something, it's going to give you what it thinks you want. Right.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, because if you ask me something and I don't know, it challenges my critical brain to start looking elsewhere outside of my current
Yeah.
repertoire for the answer. And it lets you know that I don't really know what I'm talking about. So this is two small examples of what the conversations need to be having inside organizations, because employees are starting to figure it out on their own. And it's a little bit like the blind leading the blind.
One of the things that I know users who are just really starting to get into AI start to see is the words that it might come back with if they're using it for writing purposes look very polished. But then when you start to look at other people's writings, you're like, oh my goodness, sounds just like what I wrote, sounds just like what they wrote. And
Exactly.
you realize it's everybody using the same thing. And this is what is now known as AI slop, because there's no real value being added. It's all just words regurgitated from training data. So what can leaders do to really get their teams to the point where they've got truly original thought inside the way they're using AI, so that their skill set as a human being is still needed, as opposed to, hey, if I can get AI to do something, why do I need you?
So one of the things that I have done with AI is help me understand how we got from here to here, right? So literally teach me this, not don't just give me the answer. Like, we have an AI application that we built, which is just that. It's an AI coach that coaches people, right? And so helps them to think more critically. And so I think organizations can be telling folks, here's examples of prompts that you can do so that you're learning critical thinking and it's helping you become better problem solvers rather than solving the problems for you. I even have my engine every once in a while will tell me, I have it programmed to periodically let me know how I could have done a better prompt, right? You could set up the engines to periodically say, hey, I feel like I've given you lots of answers. Why don't we spend a little bit of time helping you think through some of these things instead?
What does that conversation look like or sound like for the team member who's trying? They really are trying, but they're just not able to get AI to do what they really need it to do, and maybe their job is replaceable. What do you say to that person, and what should that person do to, I guess, get job security, if that's even a thing anymore? Probably isn't.
Right. It's probably not exactly. Yeah. I mean, was it really ever?
Yeah.
Certainly not last 20 years. First of all, their jobs may be at risk, right? And so, I always say make decisions from the head, right? Doing what's best for the organization and carry them out through the heart. If you're a publicly traded company, for example, unfortunately, you have a fiduciary duty to the shareholders, right? And so, if you could be, saving 25% of payroll through automation, then to not look at that would be irresponsible. What I say though, in terms of carrying it out through the heart, right? So, can you retrain certain aspects of the job force? Can you place them in other types of jobs? Can you give them a soft landing, right? Like you've already budgeted for this money. So what can you do to give them a soft landing? Like, a certain severance, even if they don't have one, coming to them as part of a contract, right? So, but again, and I do think that organizations need to have serious conversations, even having like a town hall, a Q&A, and give people a chance to ask these types of questions, and then just be honest with them. Don't give them any reassurances that you can't give them, but also let them know what you're doing and make sure that you have this plan before you have this town hall, what you're doing to try to help, folks through this new wave of what's happening in the industry.
One of the things that I've been doing to keep up, and I'm as you know, very heavily into AI, already building an app on this as well, and it's something that I use daily. But I've seen interviews of folks like Jamie Dimon and others who say that they spend every morning or maybe a few times a week playing with it themselves so that they understand the capabilities. So I think that's actually another thing leaders can do is instead of just relying on what they might have read, actually get into Claude, get into ChatGPT, which is still dominant, but it's becoming less so because Claude has taken off so much. Perplexity and some of the deep learning, the deep research tools, and seeing what they can do. 15 minutes a day for a few weeks just to get a sense of it. I know as we record this episode, Opus 4.8 just dropped, and Opus 4.7 was only out for a couple months maybe. So the change that we're going through is so fast. And the other thing I noticed was Claude's got a really interesting business model in that they increase the prices of their older models that they want to deprecate. So that automatically gets people to upgrade and start using some of the newer models in their apps. Very clever. They don't have to have a migration path or anything. They just raise the price on the old stuff. People stop using it.
That's
That came
great.
out. It's very
That's
clever.
like flipping it, right?
Yeah.
Usually it's more expensive for the little one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a clever strategy. What are some of the other things that executives can do to reduce the anxiety? Let's say a company has to do some layoffs and part of the team gets let go and it's touted as it's because AI has taken over their jobs. That usually makes the rest of the people that are still there nervous.
Yeah.
What's the messaging that leaders need to
Well,
share?
first of all, the senior leaders need to also be clear where AI is going, right? Be talking to the industry experts, understanding what does this look like in 2 years to the degree that they can know, right? But certainly folks that are much closer to what's happening. And so, because what would be terrible is somebody who doesn't even know, like just say, oh yeah, we've used this software. We know that we don't need you. but we need all of you. And then 6 months later, oh, guess what? We don't need you over here because they were short-sighted. So first of all, it's getting the information, really knowing where the path is going, having a strategy for the organization, mapping out for the employees, even if it is, look, here's where we are today, and we're not going to be doing any layoffs today. This is May saying we're not going to do any layoffs through the end of this year anyway. Beginning in the first 2 weeks of next year, we'll let you know where we are then. And then each quarter, we're going to have these town halls and we're going to let you know where we are currently with the strategy. And then through in those few months, the leaders should be also planning on what are we going to do for the workforce should always be on the topic of conversation when you're talking about what are we going to do for the folks that we have to let go and the folks that we want to keep, right? So that we can give them the right reassurance, but not the wrong reassurance.
As a leadership coach, you're talking to CEOs all the time. Some of them might also be feeling anxious about maybe their own skill set not keeping up. Maybe they're starting to feel outdated and they're trying to figure out, gee, how do I stay competitive for my own job in an environment where my board is saying, what is your AI strategy? And everyone's trying to figure one out. So how would you coach an executive who's feeling that, but not showing it to what's their path?
Get somebody on your team who is in charge of AI. Organizations will unequivocally have whether it's their chief digital transformation officer or whether it's some new title like chief
Chief
AI.
AI officer, right? A lot of
Correct.
people are starting that now.
That's correct. I mean, there we go. Right. And so,
I know.
oh, good. You
Yes.
want it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they need to be, they need to, within that leadership structure, they should have other AI experts that are coaching them and coaching others. But also I would say empower your teams, like let them, you know, teach them how to create agents, or if your company is using agents, teach them how to create a custom chatbot, right? Like, empower them. I would also say this isn't answering your question, but something I wanted to say too. Have the occasional presentation on how they could be using it for their personal lives, right? So that they can feel less fearful of it and at least begin using it in ways that are helpful for them. I mean, Sam Altman was saying both in the movie that was out recently about this topic, as well as an interview I just saw, how much he uses it, for health, right? And child development kind of stuff. And I can tell you, I use it for health stuff all the time. Again, and then I check out, right, through scientific journals and my physicians and things like that. And so, but anyway, helping people understand how it can help them personally as well. But bottom line with the executives is they need to be on top of it, make sure they bring people in that know what they're doing.
Let me close out with this one thought and question, really. And that is when executives want to communicate something, but maybe they stumble, what is the most common trust destroying mistake that executives are making right now and how they're communicating to their teams about AI? Even if they're trying to get it right, they may be stumbling. What are some of the things you're seeing?
Two ends of it. One is speaking out of turn, right? Saying something that they don't actually know to be true,
Mm,
right? So
mm.
a falsity, something that AI likes to do, and some of these engines. And the other is actually being ignorant, not knowing, not having any interest. That'll create as much anxiety as everything else we talked about. Is you're looking to your senior leadership to give you reassurance, even if it's clarity around your job might not be here in 2 years, or whatever that is. And if you don't know, that's a problem.
I think some of the strategies that you shared, people can start doing Monday morning, which is this schedule lunch and learns, have group discussions, have an online forum where people can go maybe share prompts, share ideas, share thoughts and sequences, almost like having a best practices club so that everybody feels supported and can learn from each other. I think that's going to help alleviate a lot of the anxiety, but at the same time, upskill your entire team from those who are really pushing the envelope forward. Thank you, Jeff. Very good conversation on a topic that is really important today.
Always a pleasure, Raj. Thanks.
Thanks. See you next time.
See you soon.